Welcome to the Life's a Bit podcast. I'm your host, Larry Mullins. Today's guest has appeared on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, and he has his own podcast called Panic Attacking, which is available every Monday. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Stephen Rogers. Stephen is how you're introduced when you perform.
Right.
Like, I have several friends, well, at least growing up, and a few now, like, their names are Stephen. Like, some people prefer to be called Steve, and some actually prefer to be called Stephen.
Right.
And, like, my name is Larry, and, like, that's my legal birth certificate name. It's got that, like, late 70s, early 80s, like, porn star creeper name. Like, I hate it. But, you know, that was my dad's name, and that's what I was named.
Right.
And it's just, you know, my close family called me Lawrence just to joke with me, but it isn't. Everybody always asks, is it actually Larry? I'm like, yes, it is.
I love it. I'm a big
is.
Three Stooges fan. So that.
Well, that's awesome. That's the only thing I can really relate to. The only cool Larrys are probably him and Larry David. That's about it.
Yeah, and even them, they're not cool. They're only cool in the comedy world.
Yeah,
like their characters are not.
And it's when. Like, oh, I talked to me, have you ever seen this show? And somebody who's, like, not into stuff like that, they're like, oh, that's not funny. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, anyways, yeah, that's just, so how I discover you is basically, like, well, I've always, even going back, like, years, like, I've always loved watching stand-up and listening to stand-up, but it's normally been, like, the bigger people, like Chappelle and Andrew Dice Clay.
Of course.
Real big names like that, and I got, like, hardcore into watching this stuff and listening. It sounds terrible when the pandemic hit.
Right.
Like I went through a dark phase in my life and had kind of a little problem with some narcotics. We'll just leave it at that. And like I was just kind of depressed and everything and get my life back together. And my cousin and I took a trip to Ocean City, Maryland. It was like our first trip after the pandemic hit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, I feel good. It's the best I've felt in a while. And on our way back, he put on a podcast called Tuesdays with Stories. And since then, I've just been hooked on that. And I've heard your name mentioned several times.
I can only imagine.
And, but no, so like how I got like hardcore into like, and now I almost don't like the super huge comics. It's like I like them, but there's just so many more good comics out there that aren't even as big as they deserve to be, in my opinion.
Right.
And
well, the bigger they are, the more they stick to keeping the fans that they have and have to fit a certain guidelines or whatever, fit the mold that they've created for themselves.
Yeah, I don't get what you're saying, but I get what you're saying.
Right. Well, it's like
under this specific umbrella, like I don't want to do anything outside of this. I don't want to.
Well, that's how they got the people that love them, and how they got their specials and all that. Is this formula or personality or character that they do? Whereas new people and people that aren't famous get to still experiment. They have anonymity, or I can't say the word.
Yeah, it's a tough word.
Yeah. Horrible to make a living off using words and not being able to say them correctly. But yeah, when the less known you are, the more you can experiment on stage. That's why I like people that nobody knows who they are yet. Yeah,
like it's crazy because and I didn't, and we'll get to you. I'm just describing how and I didn't realize like. When Last Comic Standing was on the air, that was like one of my favorite shows. And I didn't realize they were both on there.
Yeah.
And I watched Last Comic Standing pretty much the entire time it was on television. And I just things weren't clicking or whatever. And I'm like, this is funny. And then I listened to their individual comedy. I fell in love. And then anybody they mention, I listen to and I fall in love with. So I know if they mention someone's name, they're good.
Oh, well.
And that's how it's ended up. And then since then, like that's all I've been listening to. Like I'll watch some occasional like serious show on Netflix or something, but like watching stuff on YouTube, clips of this person, clips of that person.
Oh yeah.
And it's like this stuff's so good. And I've wanted to like, I wanted to start off by asking specifically like because I asked someone very close to you the same question, but booking the late night, like your late night appearance, like the late show.
Yeah.
Like, how was that process for you? Because that always baffles me. Like, I envision it as like, you know, you got to be some super huge comic, and the host is like, oh, I want that person, and that's like not how it is apparently, or it could be, but
It could be. I mean, that's definitely not how it happened to everyone I know. Everyone, like, my experience seems to be, you know, there's like two ways you can do it. You can send a tape or with a manager or something, with or without a manager. I didn't go that route. I was lucky enough that I was performing and the booker saw me live and just liked my stuff.
the booker for the show.
Yeah, the talent booker for the show saw me do like maybe 20 minutes, and she was like, "Have you ever been on TV?" And I was like, "Nope." And she's like, "Well, I think you're funny, and I'd love to work with you." And I immediately jumped on that opportunity, and we worked together, made a set that we were both excited about, and I was lucky enough to do it.
I imagine that's like, yeah, like a split second. Like, of course I'll do it. Like naturally, like,
Oh yeah,
yeah. I mean, you'd probably be an idiot to not take that opportunity. Like,
right. Well, doing a late night set is all I ever thought about. I was obsessed with late night sets. I'd watch them all the time. Like YouTube was a great gift that you could find almost anybody's
yeah,
Letterman or even Carson or whatever. You could find all these people's sets, and I was just like, oh, I want to do that one day. And when that happens, it's crazy.
that's so you just make like a tape, you know, like you got to do like clean stuff, and
Well,
you said you
I'm
worked out a
fortunate.
set, like, so you ran jokes by the booker, and like, is this okay? Is that okay?
I'm very fortunate. She was the most helpful person. It was my only experience still, but she was super helpful. She liked a certain. I most of my set was basically all of it was about anxiety, and I have other stuff, but she was like, "This stuff's very relatable. I think this stuff's really funny and would work well on TV. So let's do it about anxiety." And I was all for it. It was at the time my favorite stuff that I was telling, and I already work clean. That's just the way I seem to write. It's
Yeah.
not for any reason other than it just is the stuff that seems to come to the page when I'm writing. But so it was very easy to work with her once we knew what jokes we wanted to do, and they were already clean. So it was pretty quick to find out the structure.
That's, I mean, so, and then they just tell you like, hey, you know, you got it, or you're gonna, and
Yeah, I mean, she was like, there was some scheduling. Like I was going to do it at one point, and then it got pushed back. But it was like, you're good to go. The jokes are great. We're ready. And then it only took, I mean, 6 months was the whole process, because you really want to run it as much as possible, get it as tight as you can, and really have it memorized and know the beats, and you want it to be like you could do it in your sleep, no matter like you run it to the point where if somebody told you the worst news ever before you walked out, you'd still kill it, and no one would know that you just got some weird news or whatever.
oh yeah, so you can just pretty much get to where you can just recite it without thinking about it. Just
Yes,
like,
which can be a problem now. Like you want to make sure you're still in the moment, and that's
yeah.
a balance.
I guess I just like writing all that stuff. I'm like, I don't see how someone could like memorize all that. I guess it's the same with song lyrics.
Right.
I mean, you sing a song, you listen to a song you like so many times, and you just know the lyrics.
Right.
I guess it's kind of the same principle in a way, I guess.
I think that's a big part of it, and I think also like most of it is, well, all of it should be, it's coming from you. It's your point of view, and it's how you feel.
Yeah.
And we all remember how we feel. Like it's so if it's your own thoughts, I think it's easier to remember.
Oh, true. Yeah.
When you're just being yourself.
I imagine, you know, it's so when you're like writing, you pretty much just like pull from personal experiences?
That's my that's usually what I go through. Like I like to write from my point of view and how I feel.
And
I
how
don't
you
really
see
talk.
things?
Yeah, it's all definitely me. It's definitely like that's a big part like that I learned when I started was a lot of comedians worry about someone writing the same joke or stealing their jokes or whatever, and it's like if you write the way you think and the way you talk, you're the only one that can really pull off that joke.
True, like it's yours. Nobody does it like you.
Right. And I wanted to, and I'm a big Gary Shandling fan.
Yeah.
He was the most focused on being the most Gary he could be on stage. And obviously, it becomes this point where it's like, oh, that's who they are off stage is who they are right now. And that's what I'm trying. Always been my goal is just to be as much me as I can. And that helps me remember the jokes.
Now, like when, say you just see kind of something when you're out and about doing whatever, and you're like, oh, I could use that. Like, is it sometimes just writing down exactly something as you see it, or then you like add certain little things to make it funny? But I know sometimes situations are just funny by themselves.
Right. That's always nice when it's like that's the whole joke just presents itself right in front of you.
I was just asking because, like, I mean, I see just weird, random stuff all the time when I'm out and about. I'm just wondering, is like you as a comic, how do you? Sometimes you just tell it exactly as it is, or you add things to kind of make it a little more. If you
I think a
understand what I'm
little bit
asking.
of both. I think yeah. I do a little bit of both. I'll like say that a good way to figure it out is like when it's like I guess a story like that is just like write everything. I like to write everything that happened, and the truth is always funny. I find like I try to be truthful and not lie because I find like it's easier to work off the truth.
Yeah,
So I'll write the way it really happened, and then if there's opportunities to add things, I definitely do, and usually always do. But sometimes it's just funny the way it happened.
yeah,
And that's always a gift when you can just say what really happened. But I always
and
try to add stuff, or at least like thought. What was my thoughts at the time? What were my emotions? And that always helps me go in different directions.
that's always fascinated me. Like I probably have, like, this isn't like a therapy show. Like I'm just trying to gain insight into like comics, like thought process and
Of
stuff, just because
course.
I love listening to stuff. But I probably have undiagnosed anxiety. I'm pretty sure I do, but like I
Mm.
worry about every little thing. My one friend says I second guess my second guesses because I'm always second guessing myself, and it's oh well, I don't think it's crippling, but like I try to be like, okay, let me just try to one thing at a time, one step at a time. Let me focus on what's right in front of me and not try to worry about what I can't control.
Right.
And it's easier said than done sometimes, though. But
Well, as someone that has uh, anxiety, I think comedy certainly helps me because I'll write how I feel, and
mhm,
and a laugh is a form of recognition, and it's like, oh, a lot of people in this room have had this thought or don't think that thought is crazy. They find it relatable or can understand me. So it's like that's not why I do stand up, but it does make you feel good where you're like, okay, that thing isn't crazy for me to think. that
yeah, when somebody else thinks that, he might just start cracking up, and you're like,
yeah.
okay, they get it, they get it.
And I've been very fortunate that in the time that I've done stand up, and I talk a lot about my anxiety. I've had some people that have anxiety or even PTSD that have reached out or come up to me after shows and thanked me. And that's also, that's wonderful that they can feel not alone. So that's an added bonus to writing jokes about how you feel
Yeah,
as other people feel not alone.
yeah, yeah, I don't think mine's like crippling. I mean, I've had some things happen in my life, but nothing like super devastating.
Right.
I mean, probably the worst thing that's happened was losing my dad like in 2003, but like it wasn't like I wasn't abused. I mean, I went through a divorce. I went through a divorce, the loss of my dad, and drug addiction.
Yeah.
So I mean those are pretty major, but like trying to compare things because I've known people who've been through like serious stuff, and I've had friends that have had like traumatic like experiences, but I just tend to also worry. The anxiety really manifests itself for me like when it comes to females or like trying to go out on a date with somebody or meeting new people.
Right.
It's like, oh, I'm like, I don't know how I've even been in the few relationships I've been in my entire life. But I mean
that a thing to remember. I go to therapy. I also haven't been through traumatic things.
yeah.
But there is no hierarchy of complaints, is what my therapist will always say.
Okay.
Like I guess your moments in life that are big, like those three are huge. Those are still carry some weight. So I do the same thing. Something that makes me feel awful or very anxious, I'll compare it to someone that's going through something worse. And they are going through their own thing, but the weight of our own problems does do something.
Yeah.
And it is important not to ignore them. So you're doing good by just knowing that.
Yeah. I try to look at it now, just, no matter where I'm at, or it could always be worse.
Right.
That's the attitude I try to have, and like, my mom's like a massive worrier, and then like my cousin's like, why do you worry so much? I'm like, you see where I get it from. Like, you see I get it from my mom, and I try not to worry, but I wasn't trying to make this whole thing about anxiety,
Hey, I'm used to it.
But it's nice to know that there's some relation, and I know a few people that are in a similar boat, like anxiety wise, like worrying about like the smallest things. Like that probably I blow it up on my head and eventually just doesn't even matter. It's not as big as I make it out to be.
It's a very monstrous thing, anxiety. It can make it gives everything more power than it needs or really has. And that's thankfully, like, joking about it on stage. It's kind of the point where I always make fun of it. Never want to make fun of anybody else's, but I always make fun of my own to diffuse it. And therapy and meditation, those three things have always deflated it, but it's always there.
Yeah, I switch gears a little bit. That got pretty serious, but it's nice to know. It's nice to talk to someone else too that kind of understands what I'm feeling.
Of course.
In the sense of that's nice. My cousin's always like, yeah, whatever. But his wife has pretty bad anxiety.
Right.
But I'm like, well, so you kind of understand what I'm going through.
Right.
I don't want to sound like an alien or a crazy person.
It is hard when people don't understand it or don't think it's a thing.
And I could just, just like somebody, like he could, somebody can just go right up to a stranger, like, oh, hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. Oh, and super outgoing. And I'm just like in a ball, like, just like,
right.
Like just shaking, like internally, like, oh, what do I say? But
yeah,
that's how I am. I wanted to ask you, when exactly, I've been asking everybody this, when was it that you decided that this is what you wanted to do for a living? Like around how old were you? Like, what was it that made you decide, like, yep, this is what I want to do?
As long as I can remember, I remember seeing Wendy Liebman on TV when I was a little kid. She had a half hour on HBO. My parents must have been watching it, and it was just hilarious. It was so funny. And then Rodney Dangerfield movies and stand up and Jim Carrey's movies, and I was exposed to a lot of it, and it was like making my parents just die laughing, and I was like, I want to make them make that noise, and I just
you want to be the source of the laughter.
I did. I loved it, and they gave me a lot of attention. My parents have been great my whole life. I like no complaints, but it was like seeing how powerful comedy was. It what it did to people I loved. I was like, I want to do that. I want to be able to have that power, not power, but like gift.
Yeah.
And I loved how much happy it made people, and I wanted to do that, and how happy it made me. I was like, this is the most fun thing ever. I want to have fun all the time, and that's what it was. So as long as I can remember.
As long as you can remember.
Really, it's been
when did you actually start? Does that make sense? Like where?
Yeah, I started when I was 19 or 19, 20. I started in 2013, but I think I was writing for a little bit before that, and I've been doing it since 2013.
That's cool. I think it always baffles me. And plus too, when I look at someone, I don't really always know how old they are or how young they are. And it's a general question. Cause like, I mean, I tend to hear like people are starting like fairly early, like in their late teens. Mm-hmm. Seems to be like generally when.
Well, yeah, you mentioned Joe List. He started when he was 18, and I don't know when Mark started, but like a lot of people I know started. I mean, that's the thing. Like we have, I think that generation had a lot of access to comedy. Like there was Comedy Central half hours, and then YouTube was becoming a thing where you could get comedy and social media, so you could get comedy at any time, anywhere.
Yeah.
And I remember somebody saying like that, like people are going to start being comedy nerds started to grow and become things, and clubs were everywhere because this comedy boom was happening, just like that one back in the 80s. Like there was a club where I'm from, Syracuse, New York, that like there was a Funny Bone there, and that's when I was like, all right, let's just do it. There's one like 10 minutes from my house, and I just took a chance and got lucky.
It always fascinates me. Like, man, that's one of those things like, I wish I could be able to do that. But like just the getting up on stage in front of people. And like right out of high school, I was in bands and stuff, and I have crazy stage fright. And it would freak me out every single time. But once I would start, it'd be okay.
Right.
It's just the getting up there and being like, oh no, like a big like gulp, like, oh no.
Yeah, I think for me, I never had. I mean, you have the stage fright in the beginning because you're not good and you don't know what you're doing, but it quickly, like, it's gone because I know I'm not going to get laughs if I don't go up there.
Yeah.
So it's like,
but so you just have to do it. You just have to do it.
It's part of I just have to do this because I know I'll have fun, even if it's a horrible show. At some point, and probably the whole time, even if it's bad, I'll still have fun. It's still what I want to do. It's my favorite thing, and even a bad show can be a good night.
And if I feel horrible, like the only actual comedy club I've ever been to is a Funny Bone. There's one in Virginia, like down in Richmond, and I went there. Geez, it was probably like 10 years ago.
Oh wow!
And I don't remember who I saw, but I remember like I love those like intimate type settings. It wasn't very big. With this whole pandemic, I've been like looking at Instagram, YouTube, all these like crazy outdoor gigs, and it just fascinates the hell out of me. Like it looks like a lot of fun.
They are.
I mean, like I've seen ones like online, like in the park, like on rooftops. You posted about the one in the field.
Oh yeah, I did one
Like,
last night with Joe.
that's that's just crazy. So like, are those actually a lot of fun? Like, have you had any bad experiences at them, or?
I think here, I mean, like, as far as if you want to get technical on what's good for comedy, you want an enclosed space. You want a ceiling because the laughs will be contained, and you can hear them, and you can gain momentum, and everyone else can hear the laughs, and it becomes this ride that you can
Mhm.
take everyone on. But I mean, the pandemic was obviously hard for everybody in so many ways. But like one thing is like I was so far away from doing my favorite thing in the world. I was lucky enough to be healthy, so I got to worry about something else,
Yeah.
which was I didn't get to go on stage for like 6 months, and that's my favorite thing in the world. It's all I've ever wanted to do. I finally was doing well enough to do it a lot, and it was gone. And I learned how grateful and how much you could take it for granted. So now I would say they're all amazing because it's just a gift to be able, it sounds silly, but it's just a gift to be able to do it again. Even if it's in a field hockey field or I couldn't hear them that well,
Yeah.
but I knew. And it's also like, when's the next time I'm going to do this? This may never happen again.
Yeah.
I'm eating a whole pizza behind a makeshift stage in a field hockey stadium with Joe List. This will never happen again, and they're really fun. And it's like if that's all I'm doing is rooftops and parks and that kind of stuff until we're fortunate enough to go back inside, I'm still happy. I still get to go up.
Like I wish like I mean I wish I don't like taking trips by myself, but I want to like come to New York and like go to as many of those as I can because they just
Right.
look fun. They look fun like to be at one.
Yeah. They're great, and it makes you appreciate. It also shows you that live entertainment's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
People will show up. They we've all been stuck inside. So as much as the
Hmm.
comedian needed to get on stage again, a person needed to go somewhere and watch something and have fun outside of their house. So we found out through these outdoor shows how much we all needed it, not just the comedians.
So it also feels good as you're doing it. Like
It feels good. I'm so happy.
I've seen like from what I've seen, I'm like some parts of it look awkward. Like
Yes, of
if
course.
people just kind of like sitting down there in the grass and like how they're
Yeah,
spaced out and everything and
right. But like we're the only generation of comedians to ever go through this. Like everyone that does stand up right now, if we're lucky enough, you know, I'm there's no reason to waste time speculating on what's going to happen next. But if we're lucky enough to go back inside, anyone that started comedy after that phase may never do it again. Like there's just this time in our lives where we are doing almost like speakeasy stand up. We don't get to be indoors and do it where it's at its best. So it's
uh-huh.
always awkward. It's always weird, but I think we're going through this thing that's kind of cool. Like this stand up's never been like this, and we'll definitely grow for it. Like the next time we're all inside, we're going to be killer comedians because
Oh yeah.
we had to battle people playing frisbee, dogs barking, like kids running through. All that stuff is making us stronger, I think.
I've heard of like bands playing in the background,
Yep.
music.
Hmm.
I can only imagine there's probably like druggies too. Like I imagine there's all kinds of
I've had it all. And like also, if you do it in New York City, you're also competing with a view. Like there's so
yeah.
many beautiful things in New York City. Like I think I've done it during a sunset
Hmm.
where the New York City skyline was behind me, and I'm like, why are people choosing to look at me? This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. This is somebody's desktop background. It's
It's the the pandemic, you know, like living through I get what you're saying in terms of like the generation. Like, I just think from the time I was born till now, everything I've just witnessed on
Mm-hmm.
TV or just everything with, whether it be political, whether it be, you know, 9/11, the internet being invented, little stuff, and then, you know, comedy being outdoors.
Right.
Like, it's just everything, like how even like the history books are changing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
when I was a little kid in history class, like now I can only imagine what history books look like now. And just, it's, I don't know. I've just been fascinated. Like, every time there's some kind of clip anywhere of an outdoor, I'm like, oh, I got to watch this. Cause
Yeah.
like, I love watching the outdoor stuff. I just think it's interesting. I've seen ones where nobody's even using a mic
No.
and they just have to yell it. I'm like, oh man, I feel so awkward for them. Like,
Right.
cause like, what if you don't have like how do you project in that situation? Like, if you don't have like a loud voice,
Right. Like
I guess you just have to yell in a sense.
yeah, like one of my favorites, Sarah Talamash, is a soft speaker,
Mm-hmm.
and like she's a soft speaker, and she just has to sort of project, which isn't her style,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like we all have to adapt. But I like once again, I think it makes us better for it, and this is I don't know, it's kind of. When you're fortunate enough to not have the deal with what's the real problem is, like the virus and all of that, it's cool that stand up and comedy is surviving. That's just nice to focus on something beautiful like that.
Yeah, like the whole, even still, like with the distancing and everything, like, and at least in Virginia, some people are taking it like totally serious.
Mm-hmm.
Others just kind of whatever. And I'm like, well, you know, now when I'm outside and around people, I'm wearing a mask. But if I'm
Yeah.
with somebody I'm close with, I just don't even wear one. Of
Right.
course, you go inside. I guess it's kind of like a situation by situation basis, you know. Like, I got
Yeah.
in August. I flew to Florida to visit a friend, and like that was weird. Like, I had a row to myself,
Mm.
like the entire trip. I'm like, this is kind of cool,
Yeah.
you know. But I don't know, with the whole social distancing thing, and I just don't. If you're outside, I personally don't see the reason to wear one as long as you're not super close to somebody else.
Right.
I don't. I mean, but
And at these shows, mostly it's not that. Like last night, they all had masks on, but it's a college; they have their rules.
yeah,
Like in the parks and stuff, everyone's distance and they don't have masks on, and you can see that it's going well. So it is a case by case. Every time I've done a show, it's different, but um, I'm choosing to be positive and not focus on how I'm not performing inside, and that I'm just lucky enough to be performing.
yeah. I mean, I heard someone say, you know, people and like fans, like just everybody in the world in general, like wants to laugh.
Yeah,
You know, because I mean, laughter makes everything better. You know, whenever I'm feeling whatever, I watch something that I know is going to make me laugh, and then when I'm laughing to where I'm crying and holding my sides, I feel better instantly,
right.
and I forget about what was bothering me, and that's just why I love it so much. Because everybody wants
Yeah,
to be
it's
so serious all the time, and I'm just like, I just want to laugh.
right, exactly. And I think, I mean, anyone that thought they wanted, like a lot of people are finding out what they really wanted to do during all of this, and like some people that started comedy in the past realized they didn't want to do stand up now because of like they had 6 months to realize they didn't want to be a comedian. But now these people that are doing stand up now, it's like, oh, you're getting the people that love comedy so much that they're coming out during this weird time and have and want to make you laugh, and it's like these shows are needed, and when they're done safely, it's like this is the perfect pick me up for everybody.
And so there's some, and what I gather from what you're saying, there's some bigger comics, I guess, they're just like, oh, well, I'm not working, I'm not doing anything.
Right.
There's like totally against, and I appreciate the comics that are willing to do it like during this. And I'm just like, well, I don't go to concerts often, but I'm like, you get into comics, I'm like, man, now like that's all I want to do is go to comedy shows. Like regardless of where it is, I just want to go.
Yeah.
Because like all the laughter stuff's picking me up. Like if something serious, like, nope, I don't want to talk about politics. I don't want to talk about nope. Just no. Yeah. Not that I'm trying to check out of life, but I just mentally, like I don't want to do anything serious. I just want to laugh. And
of course, I think a lot of people feel that way, and I think that's why these shows are great.
So like, how do you even go about setting one of those up? I guess you do like comedy clubs that are normally open in New York. Do they just kind of like, I guess, set up one outdoors, or they organize one outdoors? Like, how exactly does that work? Or do you just know people that are like, oh, okay, I'll do this, or I'll do this one? Or
I mean, it's a lot. New York City's comedy scene is very strong, and I'd say like the comedy clubs, they want to do it right. They don't want to get shut down or get labeled as entities that don't care. So, but New York comedy clubs want to do shows all the time. That's why they're in the city that can do 3 shows on a Tuesday. Like that's not a lot of places can do that kind of stuff. So a couple clubs found what they want to do. Like one club really dominates the parks, and one club has access to a roof. And if they knew who you were beforehand and were using you regularly, they reached out and were like, hey, we're back. If you want to do it, let us know when you're free. And it's just kind of sort of back to normal. You send in when you're available, and if you get a spot, you do, and you show up and do a show. It's sort of how it used to be, just there's a lot of differences.
So a lot of the outdoor stuff is like hosted by actual clubs.
Yes, and then the rest are comedians that are also able to and talented enough to produce a show and get people. Like there's some killer shows in parks run by comedians and rooftops as well, and these comedians have ways of getting people out there and running it safely and putting on these great shows. So really, comedians and clubs are the ones that are making this happen in the city that I live in.
Because like I always wonder like how things like that start, because at least to my knowledge, there's nothing like that here in Virginia.
Right.
Like, to my knowledge, I mean, maybe somebody's secretly doing something in a cornfield or something. I don't know,
right.
But
I mean, you might have it. It depends on what your scene is like. It just I moved here because of this. This is a scene. You come here, like when everything was back to like before pandemic. It was the same way. Comedians would run shows so you could get more stage time, and everybody was making their own opportunities. And if you were lucky enough to work in clubs, you had a lot of opportunities there. Post-pandemic, speaking now in the time that we're in, it's still kind of happening. So it's very beautiful that our scene is that strong.
Yeah, and I hear, like, whenever I'm watching interviews with other comics, whatever, podcasts, interviews, etc., anybody who doesn't live in New York, 9 times out of 10, they're like, I moved to New York to start comedy.
Right.
I don't hear of many comics like living in some random place unless they're like bigger and then move there.
Right.
Like I know of people in LA and I know of comics in New York, and that's pretty much it. And that's pretty much it.
I know a lot of people everywhere I've been. Like there's a lot of locals. Whenever you do a show, there's like probably 2 locals on each show. For the clubs and stuff. And those are people that have day jobs but still are passionate about comedy or have a family and they can't just pick up and move. But if you're fortunate enough to be able to go and chase it all the way, you usually move to LA or New York. And then if you're lucky enough, like I know Brian Regan lived in New York, he lived in LA, and then he was able to be big enough to move to Vegas where his family lives and be with his family. And it's like, you hope that one day you can sort of live out of the craziness of a city and live where you want to live. But
then you can live where you want
time.
And just fly where you need to fly when you need to fly there.
Right. And it all depends on where you are in your career. And thankfully, I like New York City a lot. I love living here. So I don't mind putting the work in here because I happen to love the place that I live. But some people move back because they don't like the city enough.
Yeah, the only places I know of around here that does like comedy shows is the Funny Bone in Richmond. There's the DC Improv that's about 45 minutes from my house. And I think there's a Draft House in DC and then the Arlington one, and that's it. That's all that I know of. That's all that I know of anyways. But, I hear about all these famous places in New York all the time. I said, man, I'd love to live there just to be able to go to those places. I mean, go to these places that I see on these videos all the time.
Well, to have 5 venues near you is wonderful. Because some people live in, like where I'm from, Syracuse, you have one club. And if that club's closed right now, there's nothing. So it is, but New York, I mean, like, that's good that you have 5 places that you can still actually go see stand-up.
Yeah, and it's just crazy because I just never noticed it because I wasn't that big into comedy.
Right.
Then, I'd heard of some places, and I'm like, I'm putting 2 and 2 together. I'm like, oh, wait, I'm watching something from DC Improv, and I'm like, oh, yeah, duh. Like, I don't live that far from DC. That's actually...
Right.
Now I'm not even sure that that's open specifically, but when I was talking to Chris, I found out he lives like 35, 40 minutes south of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, it's crazy, that's the only, and of course, like you said with like locals, but like anybody, 9 times out of 10, 90% of the comics that I listen to and know of, they're all in New York.
Right.
And so far, everyone, with the exception of Chris, him living in Virginia, he said yes. Everyone that said yes has been from New York. So that tells me that all the comics in New York are just awesome, down-to-earth people.
Well, I mean,
that's what I'm picking up from it. So
I'll take it. I like to think that I am one of those down-to-earth, but also we're just hogs for any chance to hold a microphone. So. You ask us, we'll be there, and I'm appreciative that I get to do it with you right now.
What's the what would you say would be the craziest thing to happen during one of your sets, whether it's with you or something you noticed in the audience, like just something random? Because I'm sure something strange has happened.
Yeah, I have it right here actually.
Oh wow!
It's on my wall. I might be able to take it down. I'm lucky enough to open for Brian Regan, and he and I were doing a show in DeKalb, Illinois, and I was on stage at this theater, and I'm just opening, and I don't know how long I'm into my set, and all of a sudden this guy comes and approaches the stage, and hands me this. And it's just a giant corn on the cob with this is the Kelb on it with wings. And, that doesn't happen a lot. So I'm like, in the middle of a joke, he just comes over and hands me this piece of metal. And I'm supposed to, you're supposed to be I like to be in the moment.
Yeah.
But also you want to set the stage right for the headliner. And so so I usually just like hammer people with jokes and get them going. And and all that. But when somebody just comes over and hands you sheet metal, it's hard to not just go off on it. And I didn't give the guy any flack or anything. I just was like, well, and it's just now I have to adapt. And it was just crazy to be handed something like that. Also, that a guy could just go straight to the stage during a theater show. I always go to concerts where there's like a line of security.
Yeah.
Definitely wasn't anybody like that for me. This guy just got right up to me and handed me something. I don't even know what row he was in. But that's probably the craziest thing. I keep it on my wall as a reminder.
He had the balls to just walk up and hand that to you in the middle of you doing what you're doing.
Yes.
Did you talk about it, or were you just like, "Oh, thanks"?
I did. I made fun of it. Like I put it where it was like facing the audience. I set it against the stool, so it just was facing the audience, and I was like, "Well, it's good to be here." And I kept looking at the corn on the cob, and I think I made fun of it for probably 5 minutes, but it was it's a good memory. It's a crazy thing. I hope nobody. For anyone listening, if you're going to hand me a large object, feel free to reach out first, because it was interesting to have happen. But I love it looking back at it.
Is that like one of those things, like do you notice the guy walking up, or you're just not really paying attention and all of a sudden this guy's just standing there?
Well, like the theater lighting is, anyone that hasn't been on a stage like that, the lighting is so, it's like that way in a comedy club, but it's just a little bit more in a theater. But like, you can't see everyone perfectly like I see you now. It's like I see
kind of dark.
It's very dark
from all the bright lights
are at me, so I can see like maybe the first row or two, but then everyone gets darker and darker, and just like row 3 is silhouettes. It becomes dark quickly. So all of a sudden, this guy just comes out of the darkness with something that's metal and shining. So it's like, and I got to tell you, my reflexes aren't great because I just watched him come towards me. It could have been an axe, and I did nothing. I was just like, oh, what do you got there?
I'd be kind of like slow motion, like, what's this guy doing?
Exactly. That's exactly what I did.
Is he coming up here?
Yeah.
That's so funny. Like random stuff like that just makes me crack up.
Oh yeah. I love
of all the things. It's a metal sign with the corn on the cob and like the name of the town on it.
Yeah, and it has wings for some reason. Like it doesn't need wings. But I love it. And it might be one of my favorite things on my wall. I
appreciate you coming on and doing this.
Thanks for having me, Larry. This is great.
Before we end this, is there anything you want to plug? I know you have a podcast.
Yes, I'd love to plug the podcast. It's we dipped into it a little bit. I have anxiety, and I do a podcast with another comedian who's very funny, Andrew Chavone, and it's called Panic Attacking, and we just make fun of our anxiety, and people write in with their anxieties, and we have a therapist that's on the show with us.
Oh, wow.
Gives advice, and it's a lot of fun. It's really funny and also helpful. So check it out, Panic Attacking Podcast, every Monday.
All right, and that's it?
That and my Colbert's on YouTube if you ever want to check it out. That's about it.
Well, I appreciate it again. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It was a lot of fun.
No problem. Have a good one.
You too.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thank you so very much for checking out this episode of the Life's a Bit podcast. Please follow Stephen on all social media at @NotSteveRogers. And also follow the podcast on all social media at Life's a Bit Pod. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. Or if you're listening, please rate and write a review. I appreciate the support so very much. New episodes every Friday, and I'll catch you on the next one.